And again, the red light is flashing. That means we are live. And I'm so pleased to welcome back a very good friend to this program, to our Community Spotlight series. This is Jorge Torres joining me. He's the president and founder of Interlink Trade Services. He's a registered and licensed customs broker, and he is the person to go to for all things trade related, especially here in South Texas and our trade with Mexico. So Jorge, welcome back.
Thank you, Steve. Thanks for the invitation and this interview.
Yeah, and we'll just tell the viewers that this all came out of a recent webinar you had. You give regular updates through a webinar when in conjunction with the McAllen Economic Development Corporation. And I know that in early March, you had a very good webinar, well attended, lots of people tuned in to listen to your analysis of where things are at now with USMCA, the US-Mexico-Canada trade agreement. And we heard about some issues that are going on there, even though that treaty is up and running and by all accounts going very well. And you spoke about the supply chain disruptions that we've all seen when we go to the supermarkets, to H-E-B and Walmart, and certain goods aren't there. And then we go and try to buy things online, and the delays are there. And I know you've been telling us in the past about the supply chain disruptions. If we could start with that. In the past, you've talked about it, being related to the pandemic, being related to the sanctions that are imposed on China. But I guess now we could throw in the issues with Ukraine and Russia. So do you mind starting again and starting with this very topical issue of supply chain disruptions?
Yes, like you mentioned in our webinar, we did talk about the supply chain and the disruptions and how it's impacting our region. Well, as you know, everything started with the pandemic. We had closures at plants, obviously at ports of entry, transportation companies. So that kind of disrupted the supply side, but also because of the pandemic, consumption shifted, the behavior of the consumer shifted towards more of an e-commerce type of purchasing instead of going to the brick and mortar stores. So we all thought that the pandemic was going to create a recession, meaning that people were going to buy less, but that was not the case. People were buying more, especially consumer products, exercise equipment, video games, appliances, electronics, televisions, etc. So the demand was there, and it actually increased in certain areas. However, production was not there. So the supply and demand issue was not balanced. So also because of the logistics side of things, a lot of the containers got stuck in ports, whether not being shipped or they were shipped, but they could not be arrived at the port and offloaded. So that created an imbalance of containers and air freight space, which obviously, as you know, created an increase in pricing. We saw from 2019, pre-pandemic, an average container from China to the US, LA, it's about $4,000, give or take. It went as high as getting close to $30,000 per container. Incredible increases. But that's because there were not enough containers available to load and to ship because they were stuck somewhere in the supply chain, in the pipeline. So with the increase in demand and the lack of production and the lack of transportation, that created a perfect storm, which the supply chain got disrupted in a very dramatic way. And that's why we saw empty shelves and delays in deliveries and stuff. So we all thought that was going to flush 2021, that we were going to see the end of it in 2022. Well, we still have issues going on. We still have the pandemic popping up here and there. For example, right now, I don't know if you're aware, but the city of Shanghai is shutting down because there's a increase in COVID there. That is impacting the port. So Shanghai is one of the main ports in China for containers. So we're going to see again a delay in that process. The Ukraine-Russia war, obviously there are industries in that area, in the automotive industry, auto parts, and also the big problem that we have with the semiconductors. They produce some minerals in that area that are needed for semiconductors. So that's being impacted now again. So the inflationary pressures that we're getting, so it is creating again a situation where the supply chain disruptions, we're not going to see an end anytime soon. It might ease up, it might start getting better gradually during 2022, but we're seeing an extension of this going into 2023. So we just have to monitor it. Things can change from one day to the other. Like this Ukraine-Russia situation, obviously it was like COVID, it was out of the blue, so we was not expected, but hopefully we'll see what happens in 2023.
You mentioned this fresh outbreak of COVID in China and Qinghai, the port being affected. It's basically closed down, like you say. How quickly does something like that, if that port closes down, how quickly is it before our land ports of entry, where, say, anything coming in from Mexico is affected? What's the lead in time for raw materials coming over, or even finished goods coming over, and they're not there, and they're not coming over, and we feel it at our ports?
Well, the average transit time from a container to our ports, it's about 30 days. We've seen with the pandemic and with all the issues in the supply chain, the lack of equipment, we've seen that increase 60 days or more. So we're still in that mode. So it probably will take about 60 days to see the impact for containers if they're not shipped from those ports until we get them. So that's about the average.
Mm-hmm. And let me just pull up the split screen here. One of the experts in our region that knows this very well, like yourself, is Keith Patridge from McAllen EDC, President and CEO of McAllen Economic Development Corporation. And what I like about Keith's analysis is he's always thinking positively that these challenges hit us, but as a region, we always overcome them. We always have that can-do spirit here. And so when things like that happen, the disruptions in the supply chain in the Far East, there is potentially a net positive for our area, for North America in general, but the border region in particular. And that is that some of the manufacturing could be, we could have what they call reshoring of businesses coming and locating here nearer to the market that the companies want to sell in. And we wrote a story recently, you were quoted in there along with the Humberto Martinez from Index Reynosa, is saying that in Reynosa, for example, they're already seeing new business coming in, perhaps caused by these supply chain disruptions, that companies want to be manufacturing here. So can you shed any extra light on that? Can you tell us what your analysis is there as to whether there can be we don't want the disruptions in the goods coming in to our market, but potentially for the border region there could be some benefits?
Yes, even before the pandemic, as you know, we had a couple of trips to China through the McAllen Economic Development and the city of McAllen to promote our region. And before the pandemic, 2019, our focus was to promote USMCA and also the Section 301 tariffs that are imposing Chinese products. So those two provided an incentive for companies to reshore. So we started the process back then to sell our region and for companies to take advantage of USMCA, obviously to qualify for preferential treatment for goods imported to our region, and also to locate facilities to avoid the payment of Section 301 tariffs, and also Section 232 tariffs for steel and aluminum. So that process started gaining momentum, but with COVID, with the pandemic, that kind of shook everyone up, because that showed how reliable we still are on the Far East and other countries for our supplying goods and materials to our region. So that kind of accelerated the companies thinking about reshoring and relocating their facilities in North America, especially in the medical device industries and the commercial products. And now we're seeing in the semiconductor industry, we're seeing Intel and other companies opening up in Arizona, in Texas, facilities to rely on the supply, on a more domestic supply, because that had a major impact on the automotive industry. So yes, we're seeing more of a regionalization going on right now. And obviously, being here at the border in our region, McAllen, with Mexico, obviously the maquila industry, the EMEX industry, it's a perfect fit for those companies that want to reshore and relocate to our area, because it allows certain incentives, and it allows production, and being at the border allows for an easier logistics and transportation movement. So yeah, we're seeing this as an opportunity for companies to relocate. We just need to make sure that the governments on both sides provide the incentives and provide the financial and legal security for investors, so that they know, or they feel comfortable that their investments are safe in the area. But we're going to see, we're already seeing an increase. A lot of my customers are already increasing production. They're bringing new product lines. There's new companies moving to the area, so that's gonna continue to happen.
Yeah, like we reported on, and you're very much aware of, new plants opening all the time in Reynosa, probably Matamoros as well, other border communities. You know, they probably never, I don't think they've had as many workers in the maquila industry as they've got now in Reynosa, for sure. And so these plants, it's already started.
Yeah, that is correct. A lot of existing plants are bringing new production lines to their plants, and new companies are looking to move into the area. I mean, that's taking a little bit longer, but at least the existing plants are expanding, and the new projects are moving along quicker.
Yeah. So what was I going to ask next? You mentioned a moment ago that when these companies start thinking about relocating here, you want to have the support of both governments, you know, for all the legal reasons. Do you feel we're getting that? Do you think the companies are getting that at the moment from both the US and Mexico governments, that those safeguards are in place?
I think so. I think on the US side, yes, there are incentives, and there is legislation to promote production, at least in the US, and obviously with USMCA in North America. In Mexico, we're going through a change. As you know, there's well, I don't want to say new administration, but it's been since 2018, which, without getting political, they have a different approach to things and a different ideology, which is more socialist. So that, I don't want to say it's a concern, but they might not be as business friendly as the prior administration. So, but I think they are getting the message from the industry and from what's happening in the world. So we're all hoping, we're being optimistic that Mexico will seize the moment and take this opportunity. It's a golden egg for Mexico, and they need to take advantage of this, because we're going to see companies moving in, and Mexico, they'll be looking at Mexico and the Maquiladora program to set up their operation. So I think we're going to get there. It might be a little while, but the proper atmosphere for business will be there.
Yeah, and it's not just the border region, is it? These maquilas are there's clusters all in various parts of Mexico.
Yeah, that's correct. There's a lot of growth in the Bajío area, which is Guanajuato, San Luis Potosí, Querétaro, in the automotive industry, in the aerospace industry, textiles in the Coahuila, Torreón area, and obviously we have the border for many other products. So yeah, it's all over Mexico.
So let's move on then to USMCA. You've mentioned it a couple of times. How is that panning out now? It's been a couple of years since it was implemented as the successor trade agreement to NAFTA. I think you're going to tell us a little bit about some issues with regard to labor and what was the other one? The regional value content, things like that. Tell us if there's any areas of concern with the implementation of the treaty.
Yes, USMCA got implemented July 1st, 2020. And overall, from the operational standpoint, it has been fairly smooth, no major hiccups. The only big change that happened in USMCA, it's in the automotive sector. Pretty much the rules of origin were totally revamped. And there are two additional provisions besides the regional value content. It's the steel aluminum content and the labor value content. But going back to the issue, one of the issues that we're going through right now is that there is a challenge by Mexico and Canada to the US on the interpretation of the regional value content for core components. They need to be 75% regional value content to qualify for preferential treatment. However, there are disputes on how that's calculated. I'm not going to get into the technical things because we can spend the whole day talking about it, but bottom line, there's a difference in interpretation of the rule between the US and how Mexico and Canada see it. So that's currently under review with the panel, like the USMCA allows. And hopefully by September of this year, we'll get a resolution. I've heard consultants and attorneys saying that more than likely Mexico and Canada will win this one. And the interpretation that they have is the correct one. So, but we'll see what happens. So with that, I know that the USMCA rules of origin for automotive sector are being reviewed by the three countries because they are too complex. So hopefully we'll see that they might change some things here and there, but this situation hopefully will get a resolve by September. The other area is labor. The USMCA has stricter labor requirements, especially for Mexico, where the US has a panel that can review labor issues in Mexico to ensure worker rights. So we already had a couple of, this has been tested already in Matamoros with Tridonex and in Silao with General Motors regarding labor issues. So those were already resolved, but we see that this is going to continue to happen maybe. So that's something that we need to monitor closely because it's more of a making sure that the workers in Mexico have almost more the same rights as the U.S. workers in Mexico. So from a labor rights perspective. And in the energy sector, well, we know that there's a big difference on how the new administration, the AMLO administration wants to handle the energy sector. There was a reform before he came in 2013 by Peña Nieto, which allowed for investment in energy sector and also investment of green energies. Well, that's shifting where the Mexican government wants to make the Pemex and CFE, the Mexican electrical company, stronger, and they're not really focused on green energies. So that's a conflict from the energy reform from Peña Nieto and also some of the things that USMCA has stipulated for energy. So that's an area that we have to monitor well because that's a concern that there's no, we're not on the same page with Mexico regarding energy with the new administration, with the current administration. So, so those are the things that we have to monitor carefully. From a trade perspective, overall it's going well, but the automotive rules of origin, the labor and energy sectors we have to monitor.
Those are the three areas of concern. Well,
Yes.
Jorge, I want to be respectful of your time. I know you've got a busy schedule, so I'll wrap it up shortly. I've got one particular topic I'd like to ask you to end with, but is there
Sure.
anything else, any other subjects you wanted to talk about?
Like we mentioned, there is with all these issues going on, the supply chain disruptions and the geopolitical issues, there is an opportunity for reshoring, bringing industry to our region. With that, obviously, we also need the other side of the equation, which is the proper infrastructure. So we're all working in conjunction with the counties and the cities to ensure that we develop the proper infrastructure. As you know, there is very limited warehouse space in our region. The absorption rate increased dramatically in the pandemic year 2020 and 2021, basically because of supply chain disruption. What's going on is we had a just-in-time method of production, inventory management, in which, because of the lead times and the cost and all that, containers were flowing normally, which allow companies to have a just-in-time production, meaning just having enough material to produce for a few days or so, because the pipeline was moving fast. Now, with the pandemic and the disruptions in the supply chain, companies are in a just-in-case inventory management, which is buy whatever we can right now and ship it. So obviously, they might not need the materials, so they have to be stored. And in most cases, they're stored on the U.S. side of, and that creates major issues because we have warehouses that are being filled up with material that will eventually be needed. So for that to flush, it's going to take a while. So we need additional warehouse space, obviously, to be built. Also, because of the supply chain disruptions, the time frame to build a warehouse is extended, and also inflationary issues. We're talking about increase in construction costs of about 35%. So those two are kind of obstacles to get a warehousing up and going fast enough. And also bridge and rail and air infrastructure for air freight and rail. I know that the FAR Bridge, it's expanding, and Ansalduas will be coming to fruition pretty soon for commercial trade. We do need to work on a rail bridge here and improve our airport infrastructure and the ocean port as well in Brownsville. So that's going to take a while, but as a region, we have to look at that to seize the opportunity that we have to ensure that for those companies that are moving back or reshoring or setting up new operations, totally new operations here, have the proper infrastructure. So that's going to be a challenge, obviously, because there's funding needed. So we have to fight for the funds and bring them down and convince the state and federal government that this is an area that needs to be invested in. So hopefully, we'll get there at some point. But overall, we see a bright future in our area. With the reshoring and all these new projects moving along. So hopefully we'll keep growing in that area.
Well, thank you for introducing that topic. Obviously I was aware of the need for more warehouse space, but you're saying to cope with this increased business that's coming in, you're talking about the need for greater infrastructure investment at the ports of entry, the airports, and our seaport in Brownsville. So I know that pretty soon the next legislative session will be upon us, and we'll have all the legislators visiting again as they do. And so this topic really needs to be at the forefront when the legislators come down here.
That is correct.
Yeah, very good, very good. Okay, well, my last topic, and this was the last time I met up with you, was last week at South Texas College at the Technology Campus, and there was an incredible event. I was very impressed with everything happening there. An organization you're part of, the Mid-Valley Customs Brokers Association, is working with South Texas College and a national organization called the National Customs Brokers and Forwarders Association of America. And you've got together and created an industry recognized certificate for training students to become customs brokers. And so the remarks of the STC president, Ricardo Solis, were fascinating for me, and also Federico Zuniga. He was the director of the NEI, the Educational Institute, the educational component of that national association. So as you played a role in this, Jorge, I wanted you just to to answer and tell me, because I didn't record any remarks from you. You didn't have a speaking role at that event, but tell us how pleased you are that that certificate's in place now, or is about to be implemented, and what that means for your industry.
Yes, like you mentioned, through the Mid-Valley Custom Broker Association, I'm currently a board member. We've been working in this project for several months already. Like you mentioned, the NEI has a set of certification trainings, one of them being the Certified Customs Specialist, and that's been in place for a few years already. And basically, that is an online, about 6 months online certification that will provide the necessary training to people that are interested in working in our industry. Like Kiko Zuniga mentioned, that's the partnerships with colleges and universities already there. He mentioned the University of Louisville, Minnesota, and closer to us, Laredo College has already implemented the program. So that's, as you know, Mr. Solis comes from Laredo, and immediately when we brought it up to his attention and to Carlos Margo, he said, let's move on it. So we're pretty much following the path of other colleges and universities and set the program up here so that we'll be able to train people in our industry through a certification program. As Mr. Solis mentioned, yes, we're also focused on 4-year degrees and things like that, but the trade industries and this type of certifications are also needed because there are jobs out there for this type of knowledge. So through a certification, it will be easier and faster to get people interested in getting them placed to work. So this is already offered to members of the National Custom Broker Association. I have in my staff about 4 CCS, we call Certified Custom Specialists, but this is going to open it up to the public, to everyone that wants to be part of this. They just have to go through the STC registration process. So there might be some funding from grants so that it's free of charge for certain people if they meet certain conditions. I know there's going to be some other programs coming in because the NEI has the Certified Export Specialist, they have transportation logistics. So this will be the beginning of something that we need to bring to the border, especially to the McAllen area. So yeah, we're very excited about this.
And just fascinated by the remarks of Mr. Zuniga, because he was telling us how his grandfather was a customs broker, his father was a customs broker, and he was saying it can be a very lucrative, or you can have a very good income, create a very good business for yourself if you go into that trade. So really interesting to listen to his remarks. And like you said, Dr. Solis, STC President Solis, started a similar program when he was at Laredo Community College, and he's really invested in this. And so, like you say, we're probably going to see a lot more programs related to this.
Correct. Yeah. So, Kiko mentioned something else. Besides making a good living, yes, you can, obviously, but we're not getting any younger. So he did mention that, and we need to ensure that younger generations get interested in our industry. There is no college degree for customs brokers. There is an international business, international trade degree, but they touch on a lot of theoretical side of things, not the practical side, because we're a totally different animal in our industry. So we need this type of certifications that are more hands-on related to our industry, because these courses were created by people in our industry, like Kiko mentioned. So this type of certification is greatly needed. So
well, you'll recall Dr. Solis said that himself, didn't he? He said he went on this 4-year international trade degree program, but when he qualified, he got his degree, but then he goes into the industry and finds out that it really didn't teach him very much at all, and it was all about the hands-on experience that
exactly.
you get. Yeah, it's fascinating. Well,
Yep.
this is great, Jorge. I know we've got to wrap it up now. This has been a great 30 minutes or so learning more from you about what's happening in with regard to international trade right now. And we always invite you back when you feel there's an update to give. Just get in touch with us, and we'll certainly have you on again. So thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Anytime, and we'll talk to you soon. Okay.
Yeah. Bye for now.